June 22nd, 1991. The day the world's greatest racing teams lost the 24 Hours of Le Mans to the most unlikely team of all. Imagine this. Michael Schumacher, one of the fastest drivers on the planet, getting beaten by a car that almost nobody knew existed. A car that had been the laughingstock of motorsport for over 20 years. But inside that Japanese factory, the atmosphere wasn't one of jokes and mockery. It was war. And together with 3 discredited pilots, they stepped into the ring for a David versus multiple Goliaths battle. And the result? Well, let me tell you, it was absolutely incredible. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and smash the like button right now. We're about to take you on a journey of persistence, courage, and triumph that will blow your mind. And hey, drop a comment below telling us which city and country you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from all around the world, so let's build this amazing community together. As Rocky Balboa once said, it's not about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep trying. That's how winning is done. But what was their strategy to defeat their opponents? Who were the biggest and most respected adversaries of that era? Who were the pilots that nobody believed in, but who believed in the project? And why were they banned the very next year? Today, you're going to get a masterclass in persistence and determination. You're going to learn from the Mazda 787B that giving up is simply not an option. Almost 60 years ago, Mazda had a very good reason to be proud. The new rotary engine created by mechanical engineer Felix Wankel was evolving at full speed. It was a completely new way to burn fuel. And better yet, it was light, simple, and compact. This is a type of internal combustion engine that converts the heat from combustion of the high-pressure air-fuel mixture into useful work for the motor. To understand it better, think about 2 types of engines. One is the most popular one, powered by pistons. The other is the engine created by Wankel. Inside the Japanese factory, all of this was cause for celebration. But their rivals? Well, at that moment, they were on another level. In a completely different league. Inside Mazda, the debate was simple. Why not invest in racing? The response from competitors was clear. You Mazda don't have the slightest chance. And despite the disdain from their rivals, they had nothing to lose. So they went for it. Everything started in 1968 when the Japanese manufacturer put the Mazda Cosmo 110's coupe in the 84 Hours of Nürburgring. Everything was going well and the car was delivering what was expected. But with a problem in the rear axle, car number 18 had to abandon the race. Despite the failure, the team never stopped believing in their capacity in racing and in that out-of-the-box engine. But they weren't in a hurry. So they decided they would only return to compete when they were at championship level. But it didn't quite work out that way. Mazda learned the hard way that you only become competitive by making mistakes many times. After long 6 years later, in 1974, they launched an MC74 to also compete in the 84 Hours of the Green Hell. But again, the car broke down and didn't even finish the race. In '82, Mazda put the RX-7 to compete in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, with one of the cars finishing in P14 in its category, and the other abandoning after 180 laps. 2 years later, they would finally find the light at the end of the tunnel. The reason to keep believing. Lola developed together with the Japanese manufacturer a prototype to compete in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the T616. And they managed to win in their category. Okay, that wasn't the maximum category within Le Mans, but it was already a reason to boast and be filled with pride. And more than that, this was the first achievement of that Wankel engine. The following projects, the 757, 767, and 767B, couldn't have the same triumph. And not only that, they were humiliated by the competition. However, in 1990, they created something that could truly be called a race car, the 787. The launch of that car also marked the first upgrade in the rotary engine. The old 13B engine with 2 rotors now had 4 rotors and was baptized as R26B. For those who don't know, this rotor is a key component that replaces the pistons of conventional engines. But the engine started giving trouble. In the 1990 race, one of the cars had problems precisely with power, and the other caught fire out of nowhere, and they gave up on the race. They had spent years evolving the Wankel engine. But this result with the 787B was an enormous blow in the factory. They were already considering abandoning the idea. And they had one more reason to leave the 20-year project behind. At that time, the FIA already managed the Le Mans race, and they had a regulatory idea that wasn't at all motivating for the Japanese manufacturer. They wanted to make that championship follow Formula One standards. And what does that mean? It means no more crazy experimental engines on the track. The cars had evolved too fast in the 80s, and the organization wanted to curb this at all costs. New rules would come into force for the '92 season, and the main change was the entry of standard 3.5-liter engines. In a few years, the rotary engine would be completely prohibited. Mazda was already thinking about dropping this bold engine project. But when you have a short deadline to give up years of work, everything becomes more complicated. But the team made a very difficult decision. Keep the engine for the last season that was really within the regulations. Give a dignified end to Felix Wankel's project. That was the last chance for the rotary engine to prove itself capable of defeating the powers of the era like Porsche, Peugeot, Mercedes, and Jaguar. With the determination and motivation necessary to shut everyone up who mocked the team, they returned to the factory. They took the 787 to the workshop, put their butts in chairs, and started working. They also counted on the help of Nigel Stroud, a Brit who worked on winning projects at Porsche and had baggage from Formula One. And so it was born. Now appreciate the cry of this newborn baby. They managed to trim a little weight from the car. The B version was about 20 kilograms lighter. Nigel managed to convince Mazda Speed to invest good money to have an entire monocoque in carbon fiber and have an aerodynamically molded body through the wind tunnel, designed to gain a few more kilometers in the Great Mulsanne Strait. The brakes were also made of carbon. And now, only the boss was missing, the most laborious piece of that car, the monster that stayed hidden. After all the necessary aerodynamic adjustments, they reviewed the R26B engine and got their hands dirty. A new version was designed with ceramic apex seals, 3 spark plugs per rotor, and a very revolutionary continuously variable intake system that allowed the car to stay at its power limit all the time if necessary. So it was as if the 787B could produce 900 horsepower all the time. But after so many traumas, Mazda decided to reduce it to 700 horsepower, as it was already a competitive power. And better, it would be more reliable and resistant. These factors are much better than just being the fastest. There's no point in being the fastest of all and catching fire in the middle of the race. And the Tifosi know this very well. Those who saw the atrocity that Mazda's cars were on the tracks could hardly believe what they were seeing. The guys managed to go from one of the worst cars on the grid, and a reason for mockery, to becoming the most potent and reliable rotary engine in a race. The car was so efficient that the pilots started looking for other ways to have fun, especially in training. When everyone sought to obtain the best lap time, the guys who drove the 787B competed to see who could use the least amount of fuel possible in fast laps. The performance of that orange and green car was something unique, with perfect balance between the high rotation engine, good torque, stability in curves, and wild aerodynamics. Only one thing was missing: a person capable of taming this caged beast, or better, 3 pilots. Putting just any pilot inside the 787B was signing your death certificate, and everyone knew it. Mazda would then need to reach deep into their pockets to bring the ideal name. But in reality, who arrived was a Formula 3 pilot, an ex-convict, and a guy prohibited from racing. Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing as you guys. What kind of craziness is this? But every great madness, every crazy idea, sometimes also needs boldness and thinking outside the box, right? The guy who would need to tame these 3 other problems would be Belgian Jacques Lafitte, ex-Formula 1 pilot. So he would count on Bertrand Gachot, Volker Weidler, and Johnny Herbert. Bertrand started that year in jail after going after a taxi driver after a traffic argument. Weidler had already driven the legendary Porsche 962C, but still his resume wasn't that of a great top pilot. Johnny Herbert already had good numbers and victories, but at that moment he was already a veteran and experienced. But with his accident in '88 that almost severed his feet, he had received news from doctors that his career was finished right there. But the Englishman was very stubborn and had appetite even without feet. The most random trio on the grid was already formed. Although nobody bet on them, they were more prepared to win than they themselves imagined. And proof of this comes on June 22nd, 1991, at the Circuit de la Sarthe. The most patient Japanese team was ready. Anxiety took over the circuit. At 3 in the afternoon, French time, the 24 hours of Le Mans was about to begin. But wait a minute. That car number 55 there at the back of the grid, is that the Mazda 787B that you praised so much and made such a big advertisement for in the video intro? Are you kidding? You're messing with us, right? Calm down, my friend. Calm down. Don't you remember we said that the FIA wanted everything to be like it was in Formula One? In the '92 regulations, well, to prioritize those who were already within the regulations and didn't give trouble to the organization, the first 10 positions were reserved for those who already followed the rules. The Mazda car was probably the FIA's worst student, so it went there to the back of the class at the back of the grid. The penalty for positioning was to add 200 kilograms to the car. But for the power of the orange and green car, this was nothing. They would have 24 hours to climb the pack. It wasn't just the Underdog team that would have this task. Mercedes was also with extra weight for being outside the regulations, and together with the still promising Michael Schumacher, they would need to work double to be rewarded with some expressive result. When the race started, Schumacher quickly passed the Peugeot in front of him, which incidentally was within the regulations and free from the extra weight penalty. The Silver Arrow was considered by fans and media the favorite to be champion. But what they didn't expect was that car number 55 would accompany their journey toward the leading pack. By nightfall, the Mazda 787B was already in P4. The extra weight hadn't been applied yet, so Jacques Lafitte hadn't given up convincing the officials that the Mazda was powered by a naturally aspirated engine. And incredibly, the Belgian managed to convince the officials with this wild lie. Nobody had thought to test this. In fact, nobody cared enough about Mazda to appeal. So now the war was between the 787B at 830 kilograms against the Mercedes and Porsches at 1 ton. And the ace of the game, Jacques Lafitte and his smooth talk. And that's why, to be honest, nobody expected that car to be competitive. Nobody cared about the team. Nobody considered the guys as a threat that would do something grand. And I think not even Mazda had faith in itself. This lack of consideration from the big manufacturers ended up being crucial at the end of the race. During the French night, Mazda chased Mercedes like an endless nightmare. The Silver Arrows couldn't get rid of the pressure from the orange and green car, and one by one they started to give in. Car number 31 had problems with the gearbox. Number 32 ran into some debris on the track. So now car number 55 was already in P2. The race dragged on and Lafitte noticed that the only Mercedes in front of him was lifting off. At first, he thought it was some strategy to save on fuel. But in reality, that extra weight was starting to exact its price. The team boss was as cautious as possible. But there he got excited and demanded, "Push as hard as you can." But the combat didn't even happen. The Mercedes-Benz started to overheat and needed to anticipate the trip to the pits. And so, the underestimated Mazda 787B would assume the lead of the race. Now imagine at this moment, the team that was the butt of jokes from competitors, suffering in races for years and years, assuming the lead of the most difficult race in the world. A movie must have played in the heads of the guys at the Japanese factory. But it's not over yet. Literally overnight, everyone in Japan tuned into the race. The country was leading the most prestigious endurance race in the world. The best pilots in the world eating dust from 3 unlikely but capable pilots driving a Mazda. Pilots like Teo Fabi, Stefan Johansson and Michael Schumacher carried this burden. To hold the position, the team had an idea. Let Herbert do a double stint in the final part of the race. That same guy who had broken his feet a few years ago. He was having a terrible time inside the car. He was dehydrated. The water was already gone. His ankle was throbbing and he was having fainting sensations. And it doesn't stop there. He was having stomach problems, nauseous, anxious, totally exhausted. And the movie and the heads of doctors saying he could never race again must have come back to haunt and discourage him. But that same stubbornness, that good stubbornness that turns into persistence that he showed by returning to race, emerged at this final moment. And he wouldn't stop for anything in this world. The rotary engine that nobody bet on was running at full steam, without passing the slightest feeling of distrust. The sound of the engine crossing the checkered flag is like a scream against the officials who declared it prohibited in the next season. And a relief after so many years of failures, of trial and error. They achieved eternal glory in the racing world. Herbert's health conditions after winning were terrible. He was taken from the car straight to an ambulance. One of Mazda Speed's heroes couldn't receive the prestige of the world's most valuable podium. But the grit and resilience not only of Johnny Herbert, but also of the Japanese, is one of the most beautiful examples of courage in motorsport. After that June of '91, the belittled Mazda becomes the only Japanese manufacturer to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And this mockery against rivals Honda, Toyota, and Nissan lasted until 2018 when Toyota could enter the list of winners of the category. In other words, it lasted 27 years. Mazda's revenge. And the so controversial engine of this beast here? Well, after the race, when the R26B was disassembled, they saw that that same piece could do all the work all over again. After more than 5,000 kilometers, the power suffered only 2% damage. How bizarre is that? It's mind-blowing to be perplexed by the engineering and technology of Japanese cars. Whether with race cars or with super sports cars, manufacturing the most beautiful roar of a street car. This story teaches us something incredibly powerful. It teaches us that being underestimated can actually be your greatest advantage. While everyone was focused on the big names, the fancy teams with unlimited budgets and superstar drivers, this small Japanese team was quietly perfecting their craft. They weren't distracted by the spotlight or the pressure of expectations. They were free to innovate, to take risks, to think differently. And that's exactly what they did. Think about it. For over 20 years, Mazda had been showing up to races and failing. 20 years of people laughing at them. 20 years of their rivals dismissing them as irrelevant. Can you imagine the strength it takes to keep going when everyone around you is telling you to quit? When logic itself seems to be screaming that you should give up? But they didn't. They kept believing in their vision. They kept believing in that weird rotary engine that everyone said would never work. And here's the beautiful part. Their failures weren't really failures at all. They were lessons. Every broken axle, every fire, every DNF was teaching them something. They were learning what didn't work so they could figure out what would work. While their competitors were winning and getting comfortable, Mazda was in the trenches, getting their hands dirty, figuring out the secrets that would eventually lead them to victory. The 1991 Le Mans victory wasn't just about a race. It was about validation. It was about proving that different doesn't mean wrong. It was about showing that persistence pays off. It was about demonstrating that innovation and courage can triumph over tradition and resources. Those three drivers, each with their own story of being underestimated, came together with a team of engineers who refused to give up on their dream. And together, they created one of the most inspiring moments in motorsport history. Johnny Herbert, racing with feet that doctors said would never let him race again. Bertrand Gachot, fresh out of jail, proving that one mistake doesn't define you. Volker Weidler, the unsung hero who just kept doing his job lap after lap. And Jacques Lafitte, the veteran who believed in this crazy project when nobody else did. Each of them had every reason to doubt themselves. Each of them could have walked away. But they didn't. And that's what makes this story so powerful. It's not just about cars and engines and lap times. It's about human spirit. It's about refusing to accept the limitations that others place on you. It's about having the courage to be different, even when different makes you a target for mockery. It's about the long game, about playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. The FIA banned the rotary engine the very next year. Some say it was because they always planned to. Others whisper that Mazda's victory embarrassed the establishment so much that they had to eliminate the threat. Whatever the truth, it doesn't matter, because Mazda got their moment. They got their victory. They got their place in history, and nobody can ever take that away from them. This story resonates because we've all been there. Maybe not on a racetrack, but in our lives. We've all been the underdog at some point. We've all had people doubt us, dismiss us, laugh at our dreams. We've all faced that moment where giving up would be easier than continuing. And that's why the Mazda 787B story matters, because it shows us what's possible when we refuse to quit. Imagine being in that Japanese factory in 1991, knowing that this was your last shot, knowing that after this season, the rules would change and your engine would be banned. Talk about pressure. Most people would have packed it in, cut their losses, moved on to something else. But not Mazda. They saw it as their moment, their one chance to prove everyone wrong. And they seized it with both hands. The technical brilliance of the 787B is impressive. The ceramic apex seals, the continuously variable intake system, the carbon fiber monocoque, the aerodynamic efficiency, all of it was cutting edge for 1991. But the real innovation wasn't in the parts. It was in the thinking. It was in having the vision to see that reliability could beat raw speed, that efficiency could triumph over brute force. that sometimes the tortoise really does beat the hare. When those drivers were competing in practice to see who could complete fast laps with the least fuel, they weren't just goofing around. They were demonstrating the philosophy that would win them the race. While everyone else was focused on being the fastest, Mazda was focused on being the smartest. While everyone else was pushing their cars to the absolute limit, Mazda was finding the sweet spot where performance met reliability. And when the race actually happened, this strategy paid off in spectacular fashion. One by one, the favorites fell away. The Mercedes overheated. The Porsches had mechanical failures. The Peugeots couldn't maintain their pace. And there was the Mazda, that orange and green underdog, just consistently eating up the laps. Never putting a foot wrong, always there, always threatening. The image of that car starting from the back of the grid because the FIA didn't take it seriously enough to even penalize it properly is just perfect. It's like a movie script. The hero starting at a disadvantage, counted out before the race even begins, then methodically working through the field until they're standing on top of the podium. Except, this wasn't a movie. This really happened. And Herbert's sacrifice in those final hours is the stuff of legend. Racing in agony, his body screaming at him to stop, knowing that if he makes one mistake, it's all over. But he didn't make a mistake. He held on. He pushed through pain that would have broken most people. And when he finally crossed that finish line, even though he couldn't stand on the podium, even though he had to go straight to the hospital, he had achieved something that nobody could ever take away from him. He was a Le Mans winner. The fact that this victory stood as Japan's only Le Mans win for 27 years makes it even more special. For nearly 3 decades, whenever anyone talked about Japanese motorsport success, they had to mention Mazda. Honda, with all their Formula One championships, didn't have it. Toyota, with all their resources, didn't have it. Nissan, with all their history, didn't have it. Only Mazda. Only the underdog. Only the team that everyone laughed at. There's a lesson here about the value of being underestimated. When nobody expects anything from you, you're free. Free from pressure. Free from expectations, free to take risks that the favorites can't take. Mazda could run a strategy that prioritized reliability over speed because they weren't expected to win anyway. If they had been the favorites, the pressure to push for fastest lap times might have led them to break down like everyone else did. But as the underdogs, they could play their own game. The diversity of approaches in any field is so valuable. If everyone is doing the same thing, thinking the same way, using the same strategies, then victory just goes to whoever executes that standard approach slightly better. But when you have someone doing something completely different like Mazda with their rotary engine, suddenly you have the potential for a breakthrough. You have the potential for something truly special. The 787B story is also a reminder that success often comes right before the end. Mazda had been trying for over 20 years. They'd been close to giving up multiple times. And then, in what they knew would be their final season with the rotary engine, everything came together. If they'd given up 1 year earlier, 2 years earlier, 5 years earlier, they'd just be a footnote, a team that tried and failed. But they kept going 1 more year. And that made all the difference. How many people give up right before their breakthrough? How many dreams die just inches from the finish line? The Mazda story tells us to hang on a little longer, to try 1 more time, to give it 1 more season, 1 more attempt, 1 more shot. Because you never know when everything you've been working toward is about to click into place. So what can we take from this incredible story? First, that being different is okay. In fact, being different might be your greatest asset. Second, that persistence beats talent when talent gives up. Mazda wasn't the most talented team, but they were the most persistent. Third, that failures are just lessons in disguise. Every setback taught Mazda something that helped them succeed. Fourth, that teamwork and belief matter more than individual stars. And fifth, that sometimes the greatest victories come when you're not expected to win at all. The Mazda 787B didn't just win a race. It won hearts. It inspired people. It showed the world that with enough determination, creativity, and courage, anything is possible. That orange and green car became a symbol of hope for every underdog, every outsider, every person who's been told they can't do something. And its howl crossing the finish line at Le Mans echoed around the world as a battle cry. Never give up. Never surrender. Keep fighting. Because your moment might be just around the corner. If you've made it this far in the video, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Stories like these are why we love motorsport. They remind us that racing isn't just about the fastest car or the biggest budget. It's about passion, determination, and the refusal to accept defeat. If this story inspired you, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who's facing their own impossible odds. Because the message of the Mazda 787B is universal. Underdogs can win. Dreams can come true. Persistence pays off. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. And please, take a second to leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Are you in Tokyo? New York? London? São Paulo? We want to know. Building this community of motorsport fans from around the globe is what makes this all worthwhile. The legacy of that June day in 1991 lives on. The 787B sits in museums now, a testament to what's possible when you dare to be different. Engineers still study that rotary engine, still marvel at what Mazda accomplished. Drivers still talk about that race, about how the impossible became reality. And people like you and me still draw inspiration from it when we face our own challenges. Remember, you don't need to be the favorite to win. You don't need everyone's approval to succeed. You don't need the biggest budget or the fanciest equipment. What you need is belief in yourself, willingness to work harder than everyone else, courage to be different, and persistence to keep going when everyone tells you to quit. If Mazda could do it against Porsche, Mercedes, Peugeot, and Jaguar, if 3 discredited drivers could stand on top of the world's most prestigious podium, if a weird rotary engine could outlast all the conventional powerhouses, then what's stopping you from achieving your dreams? The answer is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Except maybe the decision to give up. So don't give up. Take inspiration from that orange and green machine. Be the 787B in your own life. Start from the back of the grid if you have to. Let people underestimate you. Let them laugh. And then, when the checkered flag falls, let your success do the talking. That's the Mazda way. That's the way of champions. That's how you turn mockery into legacy. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep racing, keep dreaming, and never, ever give up.